Hey everybody, and on today's episode of PincheAls Garage, we're back at it again. We're getting cars slammed. We're actually going to be bagging a MK6 GTI, and there it is. Now I've already started on the driver's side just because I always like to do one side first, that way I can remember, refresh myself on how to do the other side. So on this episode of PincheAls Garage, we're going to break it, we're going to fix it, and we're going to repeat, because we're bagging this bad boy and we're going to show you how to do it. Alright, so to get you started, we're going to need tools. Alright, so you're going to need a triple square 14 millimeter triple square bolt, an 18 mil socket for this guy. So 18, 14, you need a 10 for the brake line. Underneath, you're going to want to do these guys right here. They're 16 millimeters. That's an 18 as well here. And then on the very top, those are 13. Obviously, you're going to take the seal off and take the rubber off. That takes 3 seconds to remove. You're going to need all that. Ratchets and wrenches are you're going to need for your tools today. I brought all my sockets out and all my other stuff just to keep them organized so I don't drop them, lose them. Over here, you're going to want to use a breaker bar first for your 18 millimeter. So once you get this big old nut loose, you're going to start by holding this guy in place with the 14 mil triple square, and then just break it all and get that sucker off first. Then get the 10 millimeter brake line. So this guy's a little annoying, but you'll get to it. There you go. This is the sensor. This is the actual brake line. And for the sensor, make sure you unclip it just like that. And then start working your way around. Remember, 18, 14 triple square, 10 mil, and 16. And then you're also going to need to remove the tie rod end, which is also another, I believe, another 18 or 19. Let me confirm that really quick. Try 19. Too loose. So it is an 18. Yeah, so 18. There you go. Break all that loose, and I'll show you what to do next, guys, right after that. So right here, we're doing the 14 and the 18. Now, I take these completely off, just because they really don't affect much, because they're held on with a decent amount of tension. That one's going to need a shallow 18. Ooh, it's a hot day today, guys. Get my breaker bar. Okay, get back to the ratchet. Now, if you're lucky or fortunate enough that this nut will actually come off by hand, just consider yourself one of the lucky ones, because sometimes these nuts don't stay on and they just spin. They're kind of annoying, to be honest with you, with the one on the end link. Sometimes they just spin, and what you have to do, you have to use a ratchet or a wrench to hold the nut, and then use a triple square to break it loose pretty much. It's really annoying. So now the 10 millimeter to get the main brake line off. This is the only part I don't like. It's slow. These little nuts or bolts here tend to rust in place really easily because this is cast iron. So these parts rust really quickly. But they're super strong, so you can see all the rust in here. So once you take the nut off, make sure you, the bolt off, put it back on, but with the brake line removed, obviously. That way you remember where it goes. Next will be the 16 underneath. Let's get down and dirty. Once you remove this one, you are going to need to get yourself a flathead screwdriver to pop off the ball joint. They tend to rust or stay in place pretty well. So remember that. Very important step. Put the nuts aside. And then might as well do this one since we're here. And that's another 18. That kind of came off a little too easy. Need a little hammer, smack that up really quick to get that out. This is what I was talking about. Sometimes the nut won't come off as easy, so you gotta hold it with the wrench and kind of break it loose. And this happens, you know, pretty often. Don't worry. Just make sure you got your tools handy with you. So I always keep a bunch of random extra tools with me, just in case something like this pops up. And that one was a 6 millimeter, just so you guys know, and an 18 wrench. So you hold the wrench, the nut with the wrench, and the 16, and then you kind of break the bolt off with the wrench. Works pretty well. The next step is to take the actual ball joint off the control arm here. Oh, came off nicely actually. Usually these guys aren't as friendly to remove. Now the reason why we take the ball joint off, this gives us an extra like couple 1 to 2 inches of travel. So when you break loose the spindle from the actual shock, this will drop further down. Now we're going to show you how to do that. Let's see which way will be the easiest with the hammer. Yeah, so we're going to turn the wheel all the way to the right, and then we're going to hit it with the chisel and hammer here. I'll show you guys how to do that. Now, with your little chisel here, turn your wheel as far as you can to the right, or yeah, to the right. You're going to pop it in the gap right here. Now you want to keep it on the lip because inside on this shock there's an actual like little alignment bar in there, so you won't be able to get it underneath really well. You kind of want to like get it around there, get a good angle. Now turn your volume down because this will get loud. Maybe. Now remember, there's a better way to do this. Is what they call it. There's a spreading tool or a strut spreader tool you can buy for about 25 bucks. I've had these chisels for like 5-6 years, and they were like 15 bucks on Harbor Freight. They've been a godsend to me. I can use them on anything, and I sand them down if I need to modify them. So to me, these are a better option than the spreader tool, but again, I work on multiple cars, not just one. So with that being spread apart, kind of wiggle the shock around. And if it doesn't want to come down, you can bang the top of it down a little bit. Double check that spreader is in there, and if not, hit it again. And then just keep working your way down. Whew. Hot day today. It's about 90 degrees out here today in Escondido. So, and just keep doing that until the strut falls down, pretty much, and you'll get there. Only issue that I'm following right now is that I don't think the sway bar's in the way. No. I'm gonna try it the other way, see if it helps me. Okay. Forgot to mention, you need to do the driver's side first before you do the passenger side spindle, because you have to make sure the control arm or the 3 bolts on the ball joint are disconnected so the sway bar has room to travel down. Because on this side, you have a longer axle, the sway bar actually hits. So what happens is when you do that and you try to push this down, the sway bar actually pushes up on it and prevents the spindle from going all the way down. But now that we got it all the way out, there you go. So remember, do the driver's side first, then do the passenger side, but make sure do not bolt up the control arm on the driver's side. Everything else can be bolted in, but the lower control arm, just because it will prevent you from dropping this side all the way down. Once you do that, get your 3/13s on top so this sucker can come right out, and then we can do the install of the new bag. So here is your airlift strut here, or bag, whatever you guys want to call it. Now the way that these go in, they only go in one way, because you want obviously your camber to go left and right, not front and back, because that's considered caster. So make sure that you have your bag going left and right when you install it. Now these come with 3 12mm nuts with washers, so make sure you cram it in there, hold it up, and then put your washer and nut right on top. Now the alignment, make sure that this arm is inside, pointing in the right direction. Once you get that sucker in, your washer, and then your nut. Once you get one in, then you can start the rest of them. I'll get you guys up here really quick so you guys can see what I'm doing. Get that phone. See what I'm doing, okay? So you'll see I got one started. Same process, washer, nut. Now if you're lucky enough, these will thread all the way down by hand. That way the bag will stay in place. Now the one that's going to suck the most is the back one, because there's not much space to tighten these guys down back here. So what you want to do is get these two nice and tight, and then hand tighten this as much as you can, and then get your 12 millimeter wrench and go at it, or just use the 12 the entire time. So these just go on nice and snug. There is a torque spec for them. Just download the install mag guide from Airlift. I just put them on snug just because they don't need to be on super tight. I believe these go on like 24 foot-pounds. They're not a very tight bolt. Even the factory ones don't go on very tight. Since the car kind of sits on it, the weight and all that holds it in place correctly. Using your 12, that's it, nice and snug. So we're done with that. 3 bolts here, your camber adjustments up here. There's a sucky thing about these, and I'm just realizing it right now, is you need a kind of a special Allen bolt, one with a kind of a swivel head for Allen wrench. If you ever see your Allen wrenches, these are what they look like. Your typical ones are like this. These on the end have a swivel end, and these allow you to like loosen and tighten things at an angle. So it makes your life a lot easier when you have to do a camber adjustments on this, because the holes are really small in here. The next option you have is to drill this hole out larger so you can actually get more space for the adjustment. That's really up to you guys. Right now they're set to 0, and I'm going to leave them that way for the owner. If the owner wants more camber, you let him deal with it, not yourself. Or yourself. I mean, it's up to you. That's why I tell everybody, I'm not a big fan of camber. 2 degrees is usually the max I'll ever do give any car, negative front and rear. But that's it. With about 1 degree negative of toe or positive toe, depending on what I'm going to be doing, but not very much. Alright, so let's get down into finishing up the install down below. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get that ball joint back in place on the control arm, and then I'll show you what to do next. Now that you have the control arm and ball joint together, the next step will be jacking this bad boy up. Now what you have to do is get a jack underneath the actual control arm. Kind of center it as best you can by hand. Because since the strut is now shorter than the factory one, you have to actually go up a lot higher. Kind of wiggle it in there. You gotta go look inside, check your alignment's on point. If not, go back down. Find out where it lines up, because there's a little bead on the back, just for alignment purposes. There we go. And then just push it all the way up. Once you get some pressure on it, then get your old bolt here with the 14 and the 18 on it. Right all the way through, so you can't anymore by hand. The 18 over here. Again, follow your torque specs, and you gotta actually get this all the way down and torque it. Remember that your brake hose has to sit up in front as well. If not, you're going to have to redo the whole thing, because it'll be sitting behind it. Ask me how I know. You can drop that now. You'll notice the car is already sitting higher or lower just by the strut alone. And that's just because these are shorter. So there is a height adjustment here on the actual body, so you can spin the bag if you want to go higher or lower depending on your, I guess, your height that you want to achieve. So it's hit or miss. Everybody's going to be different. I'm going to set it to where they left it and leave it alone for right now and see how it sits. If not, we have to take the bag out and go from there and see where we're at. Make sure though that the airline on the bag see this air hole? That's where you're going to run your steel line. You got to make sure that's on the other side. It has to be sitting on that side. If not, you're going to chew up that line. Alright guys, get your spanner wrenches and tighten that down. After that, put everything back together up in front. Don't forget the control arm bushings, control arm bolts on the other side as well. You're going to need to install your end links. Airlift provides a shorter end link because we are actually shorter. So you're going to need a special end link. You cannot use the factory one anymore. So make sure you don't reuse your end link. Oh, it is hot today. So that's done for the front. Now we're going to work on the rear. Alright, so we got the front all done up. One thing I will tell you about the front, this is the back right now you're looking at, but on the front you might have to break loose the 13mm bolts that hold the sway bar down a little bit. That would give you the little end play that you're going to need just to get that end link in there. But that's pretty much it. And then reverse install the process on that. The next step is now we're on the back. Now the back's a little tricky because you don't want this spring to shoot out at you. So what you want to do is put some tension on it, break loose the nut. I believe it's an 18. Let me confirm that. Yep, 18 and 18. So it's an 18mm on there. Break loose the nut that's down below. right here behind the disc here. You're going to break that loose, take off the nut, and then put a jack underneath this, and you're going to put some tension on it. It's going to allow you to get that bolt out, and then you're going to drop the jack slowly until the spring loses all its tension, and then you can pull it out. That'll be the first half, and then the second half will be the shock right here. It's held by 2/16s on top and I believe a 21 on the back. But you can't get to this one until the spring is out, so remember that. So let's get to work. Now, depending how old your car is and where you live, how much rust is on here, you're probably going to need to use a breaker bar to get this guy off, and then always use a 1/2-inch ratchet. It just makes life a lot easier, especially getting that bolt out. Alright, there's that. This guy, bad boy, save it for later. Get your jack, be right back. And then just jack up the control arm. Like I said, just put a little bit of tension on it. Shouldn't be very much. If it still has a lot of tension on the bolt, you can thread it out now. The threads grab on the actual holes, so it kind of like has threads in there, but it's not threaded. It's only held on by a nut, but it will thread itself out. I know it's kind of weird to say that, but it works. Now, I don't know if you ever noticed, but I never use impact guns, just because they are harmful to your car. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, but without knowing the exact amount of torque that you're using to put on and take off, you can strip so much stuff, it's ridiculous. And how much damage you can create. You can snap just by using an impact gun. That's why I love using wrenches and ratchets, because at least you know what you're getting yourself into. So there's that, and then you're going to drop that control arm. Because of that tension, now the spring just pops right out. Just like that, guys. Now this gives you the opportunity to actually get to that bolt back there. Let me confirm that's a 21. Yep, 21. And you're going to need a big breaker bar because that bolt goes on pretty snug. Not a big one, but a breaker bar in general. I tend to use a 12.21. It just helps out when you want to get that right angle for breaking it loose. So break that sucker loose, take that off, and that'll get the spindle and the control arm off. And then there's going to be 2/16s right above here. Right here, 1 and 2. Take those two off and then you're done. That's the whole removal. And then we'll show you how to install the bags. Be right back. Alright, so the next step is you're going to need a 16mm wrench. Ha-cha! And pretty much a crescent wrench. You're going to hold the top. There's a little nub on the factory shock, because you got to reuse the shock mount. Now I already broken it loose, but pretty much you're going to go lefty loosey, righty tighty on here, just like that. So you break this sucker loose and then take the nut off and put the nut back on, because you're never going to use these, reuse these anymore. Airlift gives you a whole new shock setup, so replace those. Now you got the new shock mounts, I mean not new, but your shock mounts for the rear. Let's get your shocks and let's mount those. So for your replacement shocks, you're going to do the exact same thing, pretty much pass them through, put the nut in. On these, they actually use an Allen bit, so you're just going to have an Allen bit and just use your wrench to tighten it back down. And pretty much you're set. That's the reverse process on that. Once you do that, I'll show you how to you guys have to install the bags first, then the shock, kind of in reverse order what you guys did. So I'm waiting actually for the bags to arrive. The guy who bought the car, who bought the bags, ordered new bags for the rear just because the ones he got were shot. So he's getting new bags. So once he drops those off, I'll get to show you guys on how to do the rear end. So the next step we're going to show you, because we're not in order, we're going to show you how to run Airline to the trunk. And then after we run Airline, we're going to do a basic trunk setup. That way we kind of have a general idea on how the trunk is going to look. Since has a single compressor, we're going to be showing you a quick basic mock-up of a trunk setup, and then he's actually going to get a second compressor, so we're going to do a custom hardline setup afterwards in a few weeks or a few months, once he gets all the stuff he needs to finish that whole setup. So let's just get to going, running Airline in this car. We'll show you where to safely run it, so you know where to run it and not damage your Airline, because a common mistake that a lot of people do, they run the Airline by the exhaust and it ends up melting the Airline, and then you end up having a flat rear end. It's a pretty common issue. So we'll show you how to properly run Airline on these cars and properly secure it to the car itself. That way you have a nice clean setup, and that way it's easy to access, number one, easy to replace if you do have a bad line, and easy to install. That's really what's the key things that I have. So let's get to work. So we're back, and we're going to show you how to run Airline on the driver's side first. So once you get your line, your steel braided line in here, you're going to want to zip tie it to the brake line right there. Run it down. I tried running it around behind the fender liner, but it would not allow me to line up the actual fender liner screw, so I said forget it, we're going to run it around this way and go down behind the trim underneath here, and then we're going to go down below. You guys see down here, you run the line down underneath all the body trim. And now the plastic panels here are held by a 10mm plastic screw, and then there's actually holes along the way where you can actually zip tie the Airline all the way down until you get to the end, and then we're going to actually screw in a body screw or self-tapping screw with a 1/4 inch little grommet here to hold the last of the Airline to the car itself. And the reason why we want that, we don't want any Airline bouncing around and causing any corrosion or just breaking in general. So we're going to run it all the way down so you get to the rear. Go this way. Now we just took off this screw right here for the this fender liner. Run the Airline down below, over, then tie it to the actual brake sensor right here. 2 zip ties. Go down below. Now you'll notice here that I avoided this perch, because this is where the airbag will be mounted, so we want to avoid that at all costs. Now this bar right here does not move, it is bolted to the chassis. So what you can do is zip tie this to this bar so it's nice and firm and it doesn't get damaged, and then run it all the way down to here, to this body screw right here. Now the exhaust does hang down below. Look at those quality welds, oh my goodness, and there's an exhaust leak. But we're not here for that. So you'll see here there's a body grommet that's inside this wheel well where the spare tire is. You're going to pop that out and run the airline into that. That's where this specific airline is going through. Now we're going to start now on the passenger side. Similar process. You're going to run it and go across down that way, and we're going to kind of copy the process, hiding the line behind the fender liner. So let's make our way that way and let's start doing it. Ugh. Grunt. Now I got 40 feet of airline. Hopefully that was enough. We'll see. So we're on our way down this way. So what you want to look for is anything that moves, the airline cannot be attached to. So if there's a piece of metal, a suspension component that moves around, you're not allowed to put anything on that because that will damage the airline. So right here, this is the upper control arm for the rear. You cannot mount that to that. That's a moving part, suspension component, so that we cannot adjust that. So again, we're going to copy like the other side. We're going to zip tie it to here, or if you really want to, you can zip tie it to this line or this line here, kind of up and out of the way. It won't damage anything. And the nice thing about this, now we can actually run it over here behind here, because you're going to want to run it through behind this panel here, and underneath and down underneath the car all the way across. So now we're back underneath the car. We're going to run airline now down below. So you'll see here across the body there's a bunch of little holes. Put your airline in and then run the zip tie and tie it together. That's pretty much it for that portion of it. We'll show you what to do up in front in a minute. But just remember, these are all 10 millimeters and they just pop right off. It's really simple. And then you're going to use these pre-made holes already just to tie down or zip tie your airline in place. That way it doesn't get affected or doesn't get touched by anything. And it's really nice about this cover. It will actually keep your airline lasting a lot longer because it will prevent salt if you live in an area that you have salty roads. It will also help out with just overall weather. So if you have like bad rain or actually a dip in the road, this is kind of like a skid plate for your airline. It's pretty dope. Wish my car had it. So I'm going to get to putting this airline up, and then I'll show you what to do next up in front. So we run it down below, up and over, attached to the hard brake line, up to the bag. And that's how you run front bags. Rear bags, pretty much you just go all the way across to the right into the bay and into the trunk, and you're done. We're actually going to build a custom trunk because I forgot that GTIs don't have a full-size spare tire well. They have a little mini bicycle tires. So we're going to be making a cool custom trunk. So stay tuned for a lot more. I got to go pick up some wood, and we'll be cutting some wood and making a cool trunk. See you guys later. Hey everyone, we're on day 2 on the Mark 6, and we're doing the rear bags. So on the rear bags there is some assembly required. So this is the top of the bag, this is the bottom of the bag, and on the top, depending on what year Mark 6 you have, there's 2 different studs, and this is because the height level of the perch for the spring. So you need to make sure which one fits. On this Mark 6 we use the shorter stud, and to install this stud you're going to need these 2 13mm bolts there, or nuts, and you're going to roll them down. Let's see right here, I'll show you. Give me just a second here. And you're going to kind of get them like this. Get a couple threads on there, and then get the next nut on there. And then you're going to get 2 crescent wrenches. And you're going to give them a little tug. Not too much, because you want to be able to back them out without backing the stud back out. Now if you have any Loctite, now would be the good time to put on your Loctite if you have any. I'm going to check if I have any left. It's not necessary, but it helps. Yeah, I don't have any. I typically do, but looks like I'm all out of the Loctite. So again, it's not necessary, but it does benefit you. So you'll see here the stud, 2 nuts. Set them in by hand. You're going to get your 13 ratchet, and you're going to give it a little tightening, and then get it down there. Now this is the tricky part. You want to get only the top nut broken loose, not the bottom one, and you want to kind of like smack it really quick. Hopefully that, nope, didn't do it. And repeat the process until you can get them off. If you can, find a 13 wrench. See if it'll let you do it with holding the bottom one on. It's just because there's very minimal space and it's a pain in the booty to get that. There you go. That worked out for me. So that stud is in there nice and tight. So that part of the DIY is done on the top of your bag. Now to work on the bottom. Now here on the bottom of this bag, a couple things you need to look at, and that's first the air vent, which is the biggest hole out of all 5. This guy right here. Start it always by hand, and then if you have a crescent wrench or an actual wrench that matches this one, get it going. Now you want to start this, these are MPTs, or what we call 1/4 inch MPT, and that's what we call national pipe thread. And the difference between like a normal 1/4 inch bolt and a 1/4 inch MPT, that they're tapered actually. They have an angle to them. So you can only go so far down, and then that's it. So once it gets too tight, you're done. Make sure you get swivel airline or adapters. The next step is this guy right here. This guy goes upside down like that. This one is not used in this setup. And then your other bracket right here. Same process, stacks on top of that. And then they give you 2 little bolts with the lock washer. You just want to start them by hand. And then these bolts are 13 millimeter. Get them on there nice and snug. Okay. So now your bag assembly is set. you're ready to actually get this guy installed. However, the next step is to put your nutsert install. You gotta install a nutsert. Now, what is a nutsert? Well, it's a nut that you pretty much put on the hole, and you gotta kind of crimp it by pulling this down. This right here will kind of bend and fold itself within its spot. So, but we need a special size drill for it. So here's the drill. Let me see what size this is. I don't have a size for this. Geez. I wish I could give you the exact size, but there's no size on this drill bit. I just found this laying around in my toolbox, and this is what we're going to use, and it was the exact size I needed. Usually the way I do it, I just measure the gap or the spacing out 8 or 9. This is almost exactly the width of this. I do have to kind of spin it around in the hole to get it the right size, and then tap it in with the rubber mallet, and then it goes right in perfectly. And then the way that this works, once you're in there and you're holding this up, this goes in, threads in all the way up, all the way up. Now, use your wrench, and you're going to hold this and making sure that this is staying up in its mounting spot. And then you're going to use your ratchet, and you're going to tighten it. And as you tighten this, this bolt will pull this down and crimp it in place. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First we're going to make the hole, and then we're going to go from there. So let's get to work on that, making that hole. So the hole is on the perch underneath the car. So let's go. There's the Mark 6. She's a beaut. I've already done the driver's side, so we're going to be doing the passenger side now. Give me a second here. Alright. So, here's that perch that we're talking about. We got to make this hole larger so that nutsert fits in there beautifully. So I'll be right back and I'll show you what to do. So you can see here that the nutsert is almost perfect. So at this time we're going to actually try and see if we can tap it in with the mallet and see if it'll go in. Sometimes these are a little bit more forgiving. No, I don't think so. I need to drill that out a little bit more. It's almost there. See, I keep going until pretty much that hole is just the right size, and then once it is, we'll be able to slide it all the way in and then get it the way we want it. So just a little bit more, a couple more seconds of drilling out that hole, and it'll be ready to go. So you can see here now, we pretty much held it up with the wrench, and then we started torquing this down, and now the nutsert's nice and firm in there, and it's not going to go anywhere. That's going to hold that bag nicely in place. And all we're going to do is break loose the bottom nut, the bolt I mean. That top one, there you go. And voila, you got a beautifully installed nutsert, and it's in there nice and strong, and that's going to hold that bag and line it up in place for you really nicely. You cannot use the perch that was in here. The rubber perch is strictly for springs, so make sure that perch is gone. You can leave this one in here. This is not needed, but it's a good alignment tool for you. We're going to install this bag now. So now you see the perch. Here's the bag. You're going to put that bad boy on here, and you're going to spin. thread that guy in place. Once it's threaded, thread it all the way up until it seats. Now, you want your airline to go this way inside the control arm. So, right there, so it's nice and firm. And then the good thing is that these swivel, because you're going to need to get that, what's it called, the bag in place. Actually, I think you're going to have to remove the bushing has to come out. So the actual perch has to come out. I was a little off. They don't line up 100%. Okay, so now that that's in there, you're going to need a jack, and you're going to jack it up from right here. That way there's enough tension in here so you can use your bottom plate and your bolt to bolt in the actual bag. These don't go all the way up, so you need to actually push this, and you won't be able to do it by hand. A jack will definitely solve your problem. You get a jack really quick. And all we're trying to do is jack it up so we can bolt on the actual bag here. There we go. You have to eyeball it. There you go. And this is a 13, so now we have one new issue. So you got to make sure you don't you take that bolt, take it back out, because it won't allow you to line up the control arm without that. You have to put the control arm bolt first and then put this sucker back on. Maybe we can break it loose enough, maybe, to allow us. Let's give it a try. No. Nope, so yeah, you're going to have to take that sucker out first. Sorry. So first control arm bolt, then that thing, and then the shock will be next after that. The good thing is there's not much tension on here anymore since it's a bag, so this should just come right through. Alright, back to it again. Alright, let's see if this guy will line up for us. All the way up. Perfect. Beautiful. So next thing is your airline for your bag here is you're gonna need to, obviously we showed you how to mount everything. I still haven't run the airlines back here. So the next thing you need to do is, again, unbolt just the bottom one, unbolt this, run your airline from your trunk underneath, how I was running the front bags, so to that hole that's all the way over there, you're going to run your airlines from there to the actual bag. If you guys want to try to fandangle it without taking the bag off again, by all means give it a try. But I'm going to just unbolt the 13, that'll give me the wiggle room, and then I'm just going to run the airline over here and pop it onto the actual device, onto the actual bag itself, and then run the line there. Going to copy that on that side and run it into the trunk, and then we're done, and then we're going to do a trunk setup. So now, on the hottest day of the week, 90 degrees plus, we're doing the trunk kit here. This is called Ballistic Hollow Point, pretty much sound deadener or sound dampening material. This is the part number SDHPTK. We're going to be using this to pretty much do the entire trunk. I just vacuumed it all out, and now we're going to lay some mat. We're going to give it a quick, with the damp rag, we're going to give it a quick once through to get rid of all the dirt and debris after the vacuum. And that way this material will stick the best it can on this car. So let's get to work and let's get this trunk going. Alright, so not many tools you need to do this job, which is really nice. One thing you want to do is set your material out in the sun. It makes it softer once it gets hotter. So I like to lay it all in the sun because I'm going to be using a lot of it. So the longer it sits in the sun, the more forgiving the material is to lay it down. So get that sucker nice and hot. Now this is about 20 square feet of material, so it's just enough to do the whole trunk. So let that stuff sit out for a couple of minutes, and then we'll be right back and we'll show you what to do next. Alright, so we're back now. So how I like to do it when I have to do the trunk is, let me see if I can take this off. There we go, awesome. Is to start from back to front. And then when we get to edges, we kind of lift and we push down, and we either go up or we cut at the edge. It's all really up to a matter how you want to do it. There's really no wrong way to do it. You're going to just lay the material down and cut once you hit corners and bends. So, for example, you can either go like this, and nice and hot, and you're going to go across. Obviously make sure you don't get your airline caught up in this, so kind of like get the airline out of the way as best you can. is done. Oh, great. Okay. The wood, we're going to be using 2x8s inside of here to go up. 2x8s are about 7.5 inches, which brings us right over the edge of this, which is what I want to do, because then the 330, I forget what size plywood we're using, but it's going to give it just a good little seam right above here. So it still won't be in the way of the trunk, because the trunk hatch closes about here. So we still have, it's still going to be out of the way. And the reason why we're going so high, number one, we're going to build a sub box in this space. Obviously we can't use the space that's in the wheel well because, well, there's a big piece of metal in here. So that's kind of a no already. So as an alternative, we're going to raise the floor even higher. We're going to use a shallow mount sub that's about 4 inches of space, but you have to compensate for the wood on top and then the wood underneath, so you lose space. So you got to make your dimensions overly sized based off the amount of wood. We're going to be using 1/4 inch MDF for that sub, so that's technically a 1/2 inch of material being used to build the box. So we're at 7.5. That brings us, subtracts about 7 inches, so that gives us about 7 inches of actual 7 inches of depth for the sub, which is not a lot because the sub, I believe, is 4 or 5 inches, but then we got to make the sub box. So we're laying some dynamite down or sound dampening material, and one of the things you guys need to focus on or pay attention to is how you lay it down. Usually your first layer wants to keep it as close as you can to any seam, and the way I've been doing it, I've been leaving my stuff out in the sun. It gets really hot, it gets more forgiving for you the hotter the material is. So once you lay it down, you're going to use your hands and kind of just massage it into the actual metal. Once you get it down, when you get down to a curve, push down where it's at. Wherever it caves or puts some tension on, you cut that spot and go. And you'll notice it goes from tiny to much larger because the amount of tension you're fixing, so it lays down nicer for you. You're going to repeat your process pretty much all the way across, and then across this way, or you can go in little squares and go across this way. There's really no real right or wrong way to do this. However, the wrong way is not to lay it down and get it flat. You want it as flat as possible. I use a hammer and I hammer down like the parts that bubble the most. It helps a lot for the material to get flat, because once you start laying down your wood to build your floor, you want it as flat as possible, so that way when you build your floor your measurements aren't incorrect. Alright, so stay tuned for more. We'll show you some more once we get to that point. So we'll see you guys in a little bit. So now that you see the trunk is now laid out and matted, pretty much all the new sound deadening material is done, the next step is to build a frame. Now the frame is kind of a weird procedure because you have a lot of weird corners, so you want to utilize the most generic corners you can use, and that meaning the most simplified, because you'll notice you have a corner, you have these little metal things sticking out of the body here and here and everywhere. So we need to figure out where this wood is going to go and where is it going to sit. Now, one of the big problems that you will have is that you cannot go against the back of this the seat. You're going to have to move it a little bit more forward and then make your cuts going this way. And the reason behind this, because when you go up, the seat is angled sideways, which means that your cut will be affected because of the angle. So we want to make sure we don't worry about that. So if you actually cut your wood further back and get your cross support and then your main support across this way, and kind of make it as square as possible, so what you want to do is put your seat, fold your seat up, and then do your measurements, and kind of do everything under. So if it's like 25 inches from one specific spot to another, do 24. That way you have a gap. What's going to need to be more precise is actually the actual board that's going to sit on top is going to have to be more accurate on your cuts, because that's what's really going to sit in place and it's going to look the best. So if you still had the factory cover on here, that's your best starting point, and then you're going to work your way and you're going to start trimming the wood to where it fits where you need it to fit beautifully. So we're going to show this as an example. Hopefully this doesn't cover the view 100%. Yeah, I covered you guys a lot, so let me move you guys over here. So you'll see how this goes up. Okay, so we're here and we need to build a frame for the trunk. Now what I mean by a frame is pretty much where your false floor is going to sit on. There's two ways you can go about it. You can either build it to the false floor or build it to the actual bottom of the car. Since we're not going to be using the wheel well for very much of anything, since this stupid thing is here in the way, it's kind of lame. A lot of space is going to be unused, unfortunately. So I'm using 2x8s for this setup, and the 2x8 is about 7.5 inches tall, which is perfect for what we need because we're about 7 3/4 from here to here. So the top of this to the bottom is 7 3/4, which is kind of close for what we need, but it's going to be great. And then the 2x8 is going to be cut from the back of this red post, to the front of this red post to the back of the black one, which is 25 inches exact. So we're going to be using that as a base measurement for our left and right frames, and then we're going to need a cut from, once we get those laid down, put in, we'll do our measurement from inside over to make a nice square frame inside, and then see where that puts us. All that really matters is that your 2x8s are here for the top portion. Then if you don't have any more 2x8s and you have smaller pieces of wood, you can use 2x4s all the way across. Just make sure they're sit flush at the top. That way it supports the top of the wood, and you have a nice strong beam support in the middle, so you don't bow the wood and crack it when you start putting heavy stuff inside your trunk. What we're trying to do for this guy is maximize the amount of trunk space, because we are putting a 12-inch sub inside here. That's why we're going up high, because we're going to put a nice big sub. We want this to look good and want to dress it up really nicely. So now that we got the boards laid out, so these are at 25, these are at 35, so it gives us a nice rectangle frame. Now these are going to be going up higher, so we're going to raise these all the way up, these 2x4s. The 2x8s are going to be exactly where they sit, and we're going to build the false floor now, the actual top cover, next. I usually don't bolt these, screw these down until I can get the main floor set in nicely. So usually I use the carpet that the bottom carpet is used. The top was actually larger, so I'm going to try this one out really quick. The nice thing is that this is actually oversized by about 1/4 inch, so I'm going to cut it and then see how much I actually have to trim. It might be very, very minimal. I'm looking forward toward that. So the way that we're using so you'll see here that I built the trunk already, or not the trunk, but the frame. These 2x4s are going to actually go up and go flush with the 2x8s across, 35 across and 25 long ways. So for the actual frame of the trunk, and then I got 1/4 inch plywood, and using the factory trunk cover, we're going to draw an outline to cut that all out. Now, one thing you guys can do to cut less is put the carpet as close as you can to the, square it up pretty much as best you can, and then draw your outlines on only what you need to cut, and then the leftover is just leftover. Might be reusable, who knows. So use a Sharpie. What I'm doing over here, since this portion right here tucks underneath, we're going to square it up with the actual plastic portion of the actual bed, because when we put this in the actual car, all this was useless. So we're going to trim that off, and then cut this out, and then trim accordingly until we actually get it to fit beautifully, and then we're going to cover it with some new carpet, and then we'll build the rest of the trunk setup. What's up, everyone? So on today's episode of PincheAls Garage, we're going to finish up on the false floor. We're going to wrap that, staple it, glue it, staple it, and then we're going to run the wire harness. The wire harness is going to be a little tricky for the airlift suspension, but we're going to show you how to do it all the way. Now, make sure you have a voltmeter handy, because we're going to show you how to use the proper or the correct accessory wire to get the airlift system running. Okay? And then we're going to install a boost gauge in this car as well. So we're going to show you how to do that. You can see the false floor. Make sure you have a little Dremel tool, because we had to install a latch, or no, it's not a, oh my god, a hinge to open and close this flap. And the reason why we did it is so it makes it easier to pull this cover out in and out of the car, since it will be moved around. So we're going to use our Dremel to cut the screws off, since you have to screw it in reverse. So the screws actually are going to obviously go through the material to the opposite side. So we're going to have to do that. That was an easy $3 purchase. And you guys can see the trunk now. The sound deadening material did a really good job sealing up the bottom. Then the tank right here sits really nice. Looks like there's just enough space so I can actually put some wood down below to hold everything in place temporarily. This is going to be a temp setup. We just want to get it ready for a show, so because I'm going to be making a cool custom display enclosure, and we're going to be building a 12-inch sub box enclosure as well. But we're running out of time because there's a show this weekend, so we want to make sure the car's actually just slammed on the ground, and we're not going to worry about the trunk setup until afterwards. Just to have the car ready on the ground, pretty much. So let's get to work, and let's finish this up. So now we're here to actually wrap the material, wrap the actual false floor. We are going to be using 3M Super 77 adhesive. One of my favorites. This stuff, you're going to spray it on, wait about a minute, and then lay your material down. You want to try to just heavily coat it, but don't make it runny, because it will seep through the material. On your fleece that you're going to be using to wrap, alright, so we're back at it again. Something's up with my camera. I don't know what's going on, but I'll figure it out. Hopefully it'll stay recording again this time, because I'm only in like 40 seconds at a time, and that's not what I need. I need more time. So hopefully this works out. So we're going to show you how to wrap the actual floor here, so it comes out nice and pretty. So there's my baby, So on the wrapping process, lay your material as flat as you can, you know, so you can see if there's going to be any kinks or curls or any problems that might arise during the process. But right now it's looking good. After you do that, you want to fold it in half, or fold it over in half, just like that. You don't have to go 100% in half, but Pretty close. Now, if you guys watched my DIY on rapid headliners, this is pretty much the same process. So, bear with me. So again, we're using the 3M Super 77. And you're going to want to lay this pretty thick, but not runny. Remember that. And see here, I got it runny. So we're going to have to leave that alone for a little while. Now what you're trying to do is get a really good coat on here. The problem though that people always do when they rush this is that they immediately lay down the material, which you don't. You wait about a minute or two to actually let the material dry, or the glue dry. Now what this helps is it helps the glue get more tacky. And you want the glue to be tacky so when you lay this down it sticks really good. That way when you go the other way you're not pulling the material off the actual wood. You want this to be really sticky, and right now it's not sticky at all. So you give it about a minute or so, and then you should start making it feel pretty tacky. Like right here, this is nice and sticky. And then you grab your material. Probably wasn't even a minute, but it's really hot today, so this is you kind of want to lay it as best you can if you're by yourself. See, we got a wrinkle right there, so we're going to have to fix that. And you always want to stretch as best you can. You want a really good stretch on the material so you don't have wrinkles as you lay it down. See, like right here we got a nice wrinkle, and then just pull it back, make it really nice. Now if you bought a material that has a pattern, you really want to focus on that pattern. Patterns, you're going to have to follow the lines and whatnot, so it will make it a little bit more difficult to lay it down. But the wrinkles that were in the material are now gone, because when we lay it down we pull. As we push down, we're pulling, and that gets rid of the wrinkles for you. So we go down the other way, and see that line that we made with glue lets you pull the material to that line, and now we can start on the other side. Again, following the steps here. Nice heavy coat, but keep your distance so you don't want it runny. Okay, give it a couple seconds or a couple minutes, I don't know. I say about a minute, if that. My phone out of here. Yeah, I'd say about a minute makes it just tacky enough. Again, if you're worried about it, if it's not tacky enough, touch it. and it's pretty sticky. Okay. Again, kind of roll it in. This is another method you guys can do. Kind of like the steamroller. Just go back and forth, laying it down. It takes a lot longer. There you go, guys. Beautiful, beautiful wrap. Nice and to the point. There's no pattern, so there's nothing to worry about the way it comes out. Now we have to trim the skirt off the material. Now this is where it becomes a little on the tricky side. You'll see there's a little crease right there. Now, what you trim, what you need, what you don't need. Well, you need to go obviously over the material or over the edge. So, but we don't need that much material outside. So usually what I do is I go about an inch, inch and a half out and cut. So get a good pair of scissors and start cutting, and then I'll show you what to do next. Alright, so now that we trimmed the material, again, giving everything about an inch and a half, we're going to glue the edges. Same process, but this time we got to be very careful. And the reason why we got to be careful is because you can pour a lot of glue on the actual material, and that's going to kind of cause a headache and a heart problem down the road. So kind of go 50-50 here, because this has a really wide spray pattern, so you got to be careful. And what I'm doing is that I'm allowing some of the glue to actually hit some of the material. That's going to allow it to stick to the front of the actual, right there, the front of the wood itself. And that way you're going to have yourself a nice pretty scene, a nice pretty end to it. So, like I was talking, lift it up, but always pull. Pull, pull, pull. Because if you don't pull, it's going to have an ugly look to it. Because you might have a wrinkle on the other side that you can't see. Pull and then flap it over just like that. Now, once you glue this down, you're still not 100% done. You guys have to learn how to do corners. And then after doing corners, you gotta learn how to do stapling. Stapling is so much fun. See there. This corner we're going to staple as close as we can to the seam. why I love this glue. It works so well. There's another one called Super 90. It's supposed to be stronger, but it's not as tacky. I've noticed. So I stick with Super 77. It's one of my favorite ones. Works the best for me. I'll just feel underneath to make sure everything seems smooth. Try not to bunch up your material. Now where it starts to become an actual problem is when you start hitting really hard curves. And that's where you're going to learn how to stretch and pull, so you get that pretty curve. Kind of like if you've ever done a wrap on a car. Show you this right here. So you see the curve here. We want to kind of push it in and pull over at the same time. That way the curve gets wrapped in the material. Now, there are other materials you can buy besides the fleece. Fleece just works the best, just to give you guys a heads up. Fleece will always stretch and contour to the actual shape of what you're doing to a point. And then it won't be very forgiving after the fact. But that right there, my friends, is a wrapped false floor. Now we're going to do a quick test fit in the car. I'll show you guys in just a minute. You guys can see that. It's pretty. It matches the factory material pretty dang close. Now, there are some pieces that we can that are going to change because, like I said earlier, this whole trunk's going to change again. Right now, I'm just doing a quick false floor for him because we're going to be building an actual display case here for the 2 air compressors, the manifold. We're going to do all hard lines inside this display case. We're going to cut a hole actually inside this material for a 12-inch sub, and then we're going to build a box underneath. So there is quite a lot of stuff that we have to do before we do something like like that, and I don't want to, how can I say, charge the guy twice as much material when we don't have to. But you'll notice the seams are not 100%, and again, the reason behind this is because we are building a display box here for it. I mean, we can go all the way back and then we have a gap here, or we can push it forward and get rid of the gap, and it will come out pretty easily. Just pull your seats out, and then the reason why I add those latches so I can bend this one corner, and then this one pops right out just like that. Makes it very, very easy to take it in and out of the car. We're going to use some of our leftover material, and we're going to build a very, very basic floor on top of what we have here, so we can mount the tank, the compressor, the manifold, and the lines. I'm not going to actually be cutting any of these lines anymore, because again, we're going to try to salvage, not salvage, we're trying to not use up as much materials during this process, so we can have pretty straightforward functional trunk and bay until after the show, so we can actually put the effort into making a display box and all that for him. So let's get to work and get the car wired up and making sure everything works. Now for stapling. Stapling, you're gonna have to like kind of make sure your staples aren't super long, since we're not using very thick material. One or two will do the trick about every 6 inches. You can go to the edge, towards the back. It's really up to you guys. Always feel the other side when you staple. Just make sure you never went all the way through. And that's it. It's a nice staple job. The only reason why you want to use staples at the end of a job like this is because over time, heat and everything will actually pull the material. The staples will actually keep the material pulled nicely, so the glue does its job for keeping it tacky. The staples keep it from pulling away. Pretty straightforward, nothing crazy. So now we're done with the false floor cover. It's nice and really well taken care of. So since that's done, we're now going to be working on the actual trunk, and they're going to be working on the wiring first for the trunk, and then we're going to be working on the actual trunk setup. So to get to the trunk, we're going to show you how to do everything, what you're going to need to do it right, so you don't damage the car itself as you're working. So for your next trick, or my next trick, we're going to be pulling the seats out, and we're going to be pulling the bottom portion out right now. And the reason for this is because when you pull the bottom seats, it makes it easier to run wiring on the side. Since you're not running a ton of wire, we might not need to remove the back seats. We haven't gotten there yet. I mean I guess the other half. So what you want to do is find where the clip is at. You'll feel it. You'll feel it loose, and then right there, pull up, and then the seat should just pop right out. Just take your time, because there's obviously your seat belts kind of hold everything in place. kind of a nuisance. Move you guys back for just a moment. Now the seats are out. Now one thing I'm going to explain to you, you'll see here, there's a hook that goes left and right. Be careful because the seat will get caught in this. Make sure when you pop everything off, when you start pulling out, check if the material isn't caught in the corner, because that is very important. Because if not, you're going to end up ripping the bottom of your seat. So be careful with that. That goes for the other side as well. So now we're going to be running wire. But we have to prep for it. So now we have to see where we can and cannot run wire. Looks like everything is actually really nice here. And we look underneath here, see if we can. So for the beginning of our trail here, we're going to be running underneath the seat. Right over here. See my hand go down this way towards the middle of the back seat, down and under the carpet, and we're going to work our way over. You kind of want to do the path of least resistance when you want to run wire. In other words, as easy as possible, but without making your carpet bulge or get all poofy. So now we have to figure out what has to come off so this part can happen. So it looks like we're going to have to pull up on this right here. Feel for anything that's actually attached to, like with screws or anything like that. I don't see anything here, so pretty happy with that. Oh yeah, no, this one actually is attached over here with the screw or a bolt. It's a 10 mil. And you'll see right here, there's a 10 millimeter right there. So already, so take that one out. This will give us the play that we need to get this portion out. A lot of new cars are done in layers. So a lot of this interior piece or interior trim is layered technically. So you always got to go top layer and work your way over. So we're going to take this one off, then this, then the pillar, and then work our way over to the front and do the same thing. So I'm taking off this 10 mil right here. So now I have the ability now to kind of pop this panel off. There we go. Just a little bit. We just need it up out of the way. And now we're going to work our way towards the back. And there's a stopper right here. There we go. Don't lose those. These are important. Cool, we don't have to take the actual top panel off because it's just clipped into the front of it. So now we're going to work our way to the front. Come on, guys. It is 90 degrees here in Escondido and only getting hotter. So I'm trying to go as fast as I can so I don't freaking melt. So now we're over here. Let me get you guys a little bit higher. You guys get a better view of what I'm doing here. Give me a moment. Okay. So now that we took off this side cover, and this honestly just pops right off so easy. So it's making my life pretty easy right now. Now this trim. Hey, babe. Okay, you done groping me? Thank you. You'll see there's a lip here. This is actually on top. The back and the front are kind of on the bottom. So you kind of want to, there we go, find out where it's at. There we go, and work your way down and pull straight up. And then that trim comes right off. Beautiful, beautiful. Now the last piece here is this guy. Now you're gonna have to take the dead pedal off. I'll show you what I mean. This guy has to come off because it's holding this piece in place. So I don't think there's anything special to it. I don't see anything holding it. I'll have to find it in just a moment. I will be right back. So, to get the dead pedal off, you do actually have to take this trim off. This actually is held by a Torx right there. So, this actually does not have to come off. It's awesome. I was actually able to take the cover off. And you're going to need to use the handle and findangle it, like kind of like pulling it and kind of pull the plastic out of it. It's kind of a hodgepodge to get out, but you'll get it out. Just be careful not to break the handle, because these are easy to break. They're only held together, you know, by magic. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to pop off this cover. I think there is a way. I don't know. I know this handle comes off, so you can unscrew it here and then you can do it a lot easier. But I couldn't figure it out. But I was able to like kind of slide it all out. So you don't need to take this off, thank goodness. Just gotta take this off, and then you have a clear route now to run all the wiring out. Pretty straightforward, pretty cool. So now we have to disconnect the battery, and then we got to find a hole to run the wiring to the actual battery, and then we're gonna go pretty much go there towards the back. So we're gonna work our way to the front, pull the battery out. If you don't know how to pull a battery out on a Mark 6, then 213's on the top, there's a 16 right over here. Take that off, battery pulls right out, and then you take the plastic covers off just by wiggling them out. Now we're going to have to figure out how to run wire into this guy. Now the beauty about a lot of cars is that they already have holes punched out for different like trim styles, so because you know they have more wiring going through it. So I found a grommet right there. If you guys can see that, I pushed it. There's a rubber grommet right there. I just pushed it and it popped right through. You're going to want to pull that grommet back out and kind of make a hole in it so you can push the wire through that. And we're going to show you how to do that. But that right there is right behind the battery, right on the right of the brake booster. You can't miss it. It's like 3 inches. It's a huge hole. So we're going to use that to run the wiring for from the trunk to that. Now if you ever decide to run a battery, say if you want to do a battery relocation and put the battery in the trunk, that's an awesome place to run it. 0 gauge wire. It's big. It's a nice big hole, so it gives you the space you need without trying to cram things into the side where you know you can run damage wiring by have it rub or hit something that you don't want it to hit. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm so happy that I was able to do it there. So now we're going to do that. Now, before we go any further though, I have an idea. I'll be right back. So, I'm glad, because I haven't done a bags on a Mark 6, so I'm actually really happy because we have a whole fuse panel right here next to the battery with a ton of different fuses. So we're going to actually test these fuses to find out which one is an accessory wire, or what we call a 12 volt constant. A 12 volt trigger, which will kick on when the car is on pretty much, and then will kick off when you turn off the car. This is very beneficial here, because then we don't have to worry about the fuse panel underneath and run extra wire and all that stuff. This makes my life a lot easier doing the bags on this car, because now we're going to use our voltmeter and we're going to look for a proper fuse. Alright, so I had to go to Wally World and pick up some fuse holders. So I picked up the Scosche dual 30 amp distribution block. We're going to need this. This has a 4 in and a 2 8 out. I might drill out the holes and make them bigger so I can fit a 4 in, because we're going to be running an amp. That's why I have these extra fuses here, so we can run an amp. We're probably going to need the 50 or the 80 amp fuse for the 500 watt, 800 watt amp that we're going to be running for this trunk setup later down the road. I always try to pre-set up everything so I know I could just run it and then get it over with and get it all going. So there's that. You don't need to buy anything else. Once you buy your amp kit and your wiring, we'll go from there. We'll show you how to do all that later, and then a new DIY to finish up the trunk setup. But for now, since we only have one compressor right now at the moment, this distribution block offers a 30 amp fuse, which is perfect for a single compressor car. So we're going to install that, and we're going to probably run it around here, somewhere out of the way, just somewhere easy to access, and just run it to the trunk. So, can't even tell I ran the wiring, can you? So we actually ran it right there, and we went all the way from the trunk. So we tucked everything underneath this awesome little trim that Volkswagen just made for wires. I don't know why Mark IVs don't have this. So annoying. So we go around. You'll see it's all nicely tucked in here, just like that. And you put it on this little rail here, just like that, and work your way. Now here, a little tricky part. What you want to do is kind of focus on putting it behind the seatbelt cover there. That way it doesn't create a lot of rubbing. Oh man, I messed up. No fun. I got the seatbelt on the wrong side of it. I gotta pull it back out. I might be able to just pull it out from the other side, but we'll see. But yeah, don't do what I did. Don't get the seatbelt caught in it. Or did it? No, it didn't get caught. Oh, yay! Okay, well, I guess I'm not going to be on that side of the trim. I'm on the wrong side of the trim right now. Kind of goes like that, and then you put this piece of plastic over here. Well, you're going to have to run. Well, right now I'm going to end up running the plastic, the power cord outside of it, and it's going to sit right there, just like that. What you should do, or should have done, or what I should have done, is run it behind here. That way, it's just out of the way and doesn't rub. It's okay, not a big deal. But do that. Work your way to the back. And this is why I made sure I used 2x4s for my frame, because now the wiring goes right through here, just like that, and into here without any issues. Now, I give myself a lot of slack. If you see that, there's a lot of slack here, and the reason for this is because I don't know how much I'm going to need to use up and down. So I gave myself a decent amount of slack to move around and get everything taken care of. And you'll notice here there's a power and ground right here. This is for the compressor. So remember these are very important, since we're going to be running the compressor inside the trunk for a little while. I mean, underneath the floor for a little while, until we get the rest of the trunk setup done. We're going to put everything inside here first, and then once we get all the rest of the materials that we need to finish this trunk setup, then we're going to put everything, take everything out of here and put it on top. And this is why there's a lot of slack on a lot of stuff that's in here, because I want to make sure I don't have to take lines out and put lines back in to make things work. We're going to do a quick wire to make a quick wire up, just so I can test everything. Once everything is tested and working, I'm going to disconnect everything and then finish up the cleanup process and mounting. So we're going to show you how to do that next. So we're over here in the engine bay, and here's that grommet that I was talking about that's in that firewall. I drilled a hole in here and then pretty much ran the wire right through it. It was beautiful. So now we just got to run it through and push it in, and then that part is done for your wiring in your bay. You're going to need the positive and the ground. Now you got to find yourself a good grounding point. There's a decent amount of places in here you can use. Here's the factory grounding spot right here, which is a good spot. Don't ground directly to the battery. Not a good thing to do. You want to ground to an actual body panel. So we can use this spot if we want to. Which I'm going to end up doing is using this spot, just because it looks like a good spot for me to do it at. So we might just ground it there, and then kind of go like that, and tuck the wiring down below, and then we'll figure it out right now. I'll show you what we did. I need my two hands, can't do it with one. So we got the fuse holder bolted to the this distribution block on the factory car, on the car. We grounded it to the factory battery post here. So everything reaches, it's out of the way, it's clean. The only downside of this setup that I'm doing is that there's no easy way to get to the fuse holder. And the only reason why I went this way is because of the ground. I didn't have any extra ground wire to make it longer, but this is pretty much the best option I have so far. But a 30 amp fuse is required because of the compressors, so you got to make sure you have a 30 amp fuse per compressor. So if you have two compressors, you're going to need a 60 amp fuse. A 50 might be enough, but a 60 amp fuse will probably be the correct fuse you want to use if you're going to run both compressors in one power outlet. Okay? So now we have enough length for power. It's already grounded. Now we're going to run the accessory wire. Now the accessory wire, I was going to run it inside the car here, inside the engine bay, but underneath the dash, since I'm going to be underneath there, I'm going to be doing that next. But the first thing we need to do is actually run power to the car now and look for an accessory wire. So now we're going to set our voltmeter to V1000, so voltage at 1000. We're just going to confirm we're getting correct readouts. The battery's been sitting for a while, the car hasn't been running, so it should be just at 12 volts, which we are at 12 volts here. So since the car is off, you should have nothing reading at all unless there's constant, what we call hot wires. Hot wires are always on. Those are what you connect to pretty much anything that that kicks on with an accessory wire, which is what we have here. This guy right here, the pink cable on your P3 harness. This is called an accessory wire. Now this wire needs to be a trigger wire. In other words, every time you turn the ignition on, it gets 12 volts. Nothing more, nothing less. This is all we need. If it has less voltage, it will not work correctly. Okay? So now we got to find on here, pretty much on the fuse panel, a 12 volt source that only kicks on when the ignition is on, all the way in the on position, and when the car is actually running. So there's actually a couple things you need to look for, because sometimes there are some of these that won't kick on when the car is running. It only kicks on when you're kicking the accessory wire on. So I'm going to get you guys here on the tripod. You guys can see what I'm doing. So right now we're just going to look for a 12 volt source. Put your ground somewhere around here where it will stick. This is steel, so it should give you a constant 12. And just confirm that we have a 12, that this is reading 12 somewhere. So one of these guys is going to give us a readout here. So this is giving me a 12 volt source. This is a constant fuse, so this is always on. So we don't need that. Same with this one, that's a constant. Same with that. Same. 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 Okay, so we got one that doesn't kick on. no power. No power here. No power. No power. Same no power. Nope. And nope. So we got 1, 2, 3, and plus 4. So we have 7 of them right now so far that don't have power when the key is off. So the next thing is to find out which one we can use when the ignition is turned on. We don't want to turn the ignition and nothing happens. Then your bags won't work. So I'm going to turn the ignition right now, and I got a 12 volt source on this bottom left one. So that's a good one to go with. Same with this guy. This is giving me a 12 volt. So when I turn the ignition off, it cuts it off immediately. Same with these guys. So these 3 right here on the bottom of your fuse panel will work beautifully as an accessory 12 volt. However, the car isn't on yet, so let's kick the car on and see what happens. Got pressure on the brake here. Give me a second. So now the car is on. Let's confirm that we still have our voltage. Correct? Correct? And correct. So these 3 you can use to tap into to get your car, your accessory wire running on here. So we're going to show you how to run an accessory wire without damaging the fuse panel here. It's really simple. Give me a second, I'm going to let the car warm up and I'll be right back. So I did a quick wrap around the fuse to tap into it. I wrapped the bottom of it with the wire and pushed it back in with a good wire. I kind of wrapped it inside of here. This is just strictly for testing. We're not going to keep it like this. We're going to actually crimp everything correctly. So the next thing we're going to do is actually see if everything turns on the way it's supposed to and see if we got a functional air suspension. So right now you guys can see 3 P's kicking on, and you just heard the air compressor just kick right on. So right away we already have a functional air suspension now, or a functional setup and controller management. So now we're going to let this guy air up, fill up the tank, and then we're going to show you what's going to be happening next. We're going to test everything after. It's going to take a couple minutes, so bear with us and we'll hear from you guys in a little bit. See you guys in a little bit. So now we're done, and now we're doing a pressure test. It is 90 degrees out here, a little bit hotter, so there will be a little minor leak, which is kind of normal, but the goal is so you don't lose anywhere from, I think is it 1 to 3 psi within 30 minutes. If you don't lose any air within 30 minutes, 1 psi within 30 is perfectly fine, due to the fact that the bags are stretching, and the heat out here will expand and contract the air. So this might actually go up in pressure or might go down in pressure 1 to 2 psi. But if it stays at this pressure where we have it, we're at 27, 27, 27, 28, 30 minutes to 40 minutes, and it doesn't change like drastically, maybe 1, 2 psi within that much time, you're pretty much golden. The tank is dropping from 149 to 147, so it dropped 2 psi within a minute. So there is a leak in the tank. We'll find out in a couple more minutes if this keeps dropping. For sure there is a leak in that tank. And there is, that tank, whoever originally set up this whole bag system did not do a good job in sealing the tank. So I'm actually going to empty the tank again, and I'm going to properly seal it so this guy doesn't have any leaks on his tank, and it's going to be legit for him. But right now it did drop 2 psi within, like I said, a minute or two, but it's actually stopping now. Interesting. But we're going to let it sit for a while, so I'll be back. I'm going to actually do some other stuff right now at the moment, but right now it looks like it's going to be pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the results as it is so far. Again, taking your time installing everything, not over tightening all your lines, taking your time is the most valuable asset you will have when doing bags, because you don't want to go back and redo lines over and over. Like on my Mark IV, I think I redid the lines probably 3 times until I finally got them to stop leaking. Right now I'm extremely happy where they're sitting, and they haven't dropped anymore. So the tank just dropped another PSI, so there is a leak in the tank, but everything else is looking pretty dang good. The tank is easy to get to, and it's very, very easy to fix, and I'll get to that in just a couple minutes. I'll show you what to do next. Alright, so wiring is done, front and back all the way. We got the trunk all done. Right now this is the basic setup we're having right now. We're not going to keep it this way for very long. This is probably going to be like this probably for a month, and it's going to look completely different. And I'll give you guys a rundown what we're going to be doing. The tank's going to stay down below. We don't want the tank to be seen. However, the compressors, we're going to actually have 2 air compressors. Not going to be seen, not going to be here yet. So there's going to be 2 air compressors. We're actually going to put the manifold up on top as well, right here in this big empty space. And the reason why we need this is so we're going to use that as a brace to build our box. We're going to build a sub box in this empty space here for a 12-inch sub, and we're going to be putting a recess because we're going to be doing, let's put this trunk cover here in. So once this is down, and you'll see here, this is our trunk cover, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to build a display box that goes across right underneath here. So under this trim, because this is where the lid sits underneath, we're going to build a display box for both compressors and the manifold underneath. We're going to run a bunch of hard line inside the display box. We're going to cut a big hole here, we're going to recess it, and we're going to build a 12-inch sub underneath that and build our sub box. That way it just looks like a super clean, super fun trunk, and it's gonna be, believe me, it's gonna be freaking cool, because I'm gonna be doing 2 things super custom in this car that probably hasn't been done yet in the air, water, or bag world. I don't know yet. I'm not gonna say anything until it's done, but that's on a whole other DIY. For your current DIY, I guess, for this DIY, just make sure you fill up all your tanks, fill your lines, look for leaks, and put everything back together. So we're going to show you the final results before and after, and we're going to give you a full tour of the car. So stay tuned for that right now. So thanks for this portion of the DIY. Thank you, and enjoy the Mark 6.
Chosen one, the one to ride in the golden sun. The only one who never had a fairy growing up. I was told to run until my journey is over and done. Safer from his clutch, I know that I can't till I'm old enough. I am the chosen one to slay all the evil with no remorse. I fast a horse and kill all my foes with a master sword. Find the Triforce and keep it away from the man I swore to kill. I'm damn sure to take back the land from Ganondorf. Here comes the storm. Here comes the storm. I'm the chosen one to get the medallions from the temples. I know it's tough, but my stallion's very helpful. I'm wiser now, about to bring you your repentance. I find the clouds and now you feel a rain of vengeance. The chosen one who has been bestowed upon. The journey that I alone have begun, and then I will find the stones you want. I am the chosen one to protect the sacred realm. For 7 whole years they waited so, and now I am back with the stages though. I am the chosen one that will bring the peace to Hyrule. Learning the ropes to be insightful, mind and power, weapons are my tools. The chosen one to kill the zombies.